Konnichiwa, minasan. We are back for another episode of album discussions, and today we will talk about the third album, Mahjong Titan, which was released on Groundhog Day. Oddly enough, it was because I had recently rewatched the Bill Murray movie, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh man, it kind of seems like I'm repeating like a time loop lately, right? Like I had this feeling that I was kind of stuck in a time loop, like I was doing the same things every day. And it kind of made me think, oh, well, I should release the album on that day, right? So that's where the inspiration for the date of Mahjong Titan came out. Um, Mahjong Titan is like the solitaire version of the Japanese Chinese game Mahjong, which I have a set here. One of my favorite games to play. Unfortunately, most Canadians don't know how to play it, so it's kind of sad. I don't really have anybody to play it with. I wish I did, but I love the game. I love the idea of it, right? So that was how I look at it. Like if the rap game, as it's called, is like a game, well, then I'm playing it like Mahjong. It's mad complex. It's not like chess or checkers or even cards. It's a lot more complex than that. So I really could relate it to the idea and the complexity of Mahjong as a game. So, and then also like Titan, very powerful, big. So, like the Mahjong Titan, right? So that's where that came out. The cover, which I don't have a picture to show anybody, unfortunately. I do like on my computer, but I don't have a physical copy because TuneCore stopped doing that around this time. Kind of sucked. I really would have liked to get a physical copy of this record. It turned out really good. I'm very proud of this album. But the album cover, if you see the pictures for it, like on the YouTube releases or Spotify or anything, you'll see the cover. That was taken with my ex, Haruna, when we went on a trip to Fort Erie, because that's where I grew up. That was like my hometown when I was younger, right? So it was like I was really going back to my roots. And this album was a lot of fun to make. Now, most of the tracks were actually mixed and mastered by myself and D-Mack, like Nail Gun. Most of them were. However, a few tracks, two tracks, I believe, were done by Daybreak, who did all the mixing and mastering for Impulse, my first album. So that was released 2021, and there were actually two albums I dropped that year, which was pretty cool. But yeah, the interesting thing about that was Daybreak actually did the mixing and the mastering, but most of the instrumentals on that record were Tone Jones once again. So the album starts off with this very atmospheric musical piece, and it's just instrumentation, very simple. There's some scratching, there's strings, piano. You also have me rapping a verse, and then you have the other members of the SOS Brigade at the time, as we called ourselves, like our unit of like musicians, all kind of reciting different dialogue about like my story, like kind of reflecting on how far we've come up to that point. So it starts off with OG Loke Dogger Tony, who used to be a former friend of mine. I forgive him for our fallout. I wish him nothing but the best, so I won't speak ill of him. I will just focus on the positives in this case. He did very good. He kind of delivered like the opening dialogue of why I'm admirable as an artist. I have persistence. I don't give up. I keep doing what I want. I'm very good at what I do, and I'm serious about it, right? So you get that. And then he ends his dialogue by saying that like this album is going to be unlike anything you ever heard before, which it really was. It was a whole new vibe and sound and unique sort of creativity with the record. And then I do the verse where I used a lot of Twin Peaks references because I was really heavily inspired by like sort of abstract art, like David Lynch films and stuff like that, and his music, and even Eric Satie, very eccentric, unique sort of vibes, right? So that's where that kind of musical atmosphere ended up. And then I ended up using just the instrumental track without the scratching or the vocals on the short film I did, which I plan to do a full film of in the future, called Tanabata short film. And I used that as like the opening theme where you have like the footage of Japan. And it was really cool. I really liked doing that movie. And even though it was a short film, I'm excited to make the full version of it in the future. But yeah, so that ended up getting reused like as the intro. And then I took sound effects from Antarctica and also put them in the background. Like you'll hear penguins chirping and whatnot, because I was watching this movie at the time that I was also heavily really into. I've seen it so many times. I loved it because the idea of the movie, especially with COVID hitting, it was relatable. And the way it had this all-star cast of international actors, like really good actors too, called Virus Fukasu Nohi. And yeah, I was really into this movie, so I added like that atmosphere of Antarctica into the background too, right? And then yeah, Reiko said some words, Olga said some words, and then I'm not sure if I did. I think I did use a bit of saxophone in the background. That's when I started experimenting with that. And then also there was a bit of scratching to like kind of hype up the mood. Very atmospheric, preparing the audience for this crazy album that's about to unfold, right? And then it ends too with a sample where you hear like "I'm back, bitches," and then there's this big explosion because the second track, which starts off, is back again. So it leads into it. But yeah, that instrumentation, most of it, other than the scratching and the other additions, was Tone Jones, and so was Back Again. And then that actually had some co-production from Smoke Signal Productions. He added an ocarina to it to kind of give it a more mystical vibe, a very cool vibe I really liked about that. And then Back Again was talking about how like I went to Hamilton, I go back to Fort Erie, I keep going back and forth, the cycle, right? So that's what that song was about, and especially because I had went there with my ex to take the picture, to see the sights, the old fort, got the picture of me in front of it. And the idea of that, too, was like going back and forth, back and forth. So that's why that cover has really deep significance, right? Especially for the beginning of the album, to show where the roots all started and how they led me to where I am and how I kind of keep going back and forth. Because I enjoyed my time in Fort Erie as a kid a lot more than I enjoyed my time in Hamilton, to be honest. So, and it's also a reference to a Jay-Z song that he did for the Streets is Watching soundtrack when he made an independent like movie around the time he made Reasonable Doubt in his second album, In My Lifetime Volume 1. He was making this movie called The Streets is Watching, and he did a song just for the soundtrack called From Marcy to Hollywood. And I really liked the chorus of that song and the relatability of the message. So I kind of like did my own spin on it, but instead of Marcy and Hollywood, it was Fort Erie and Hamilton, Fort Erie to Hamilton, and back again, back again. And yeah, that was a really exciting song. D-Mack really got into it because he said his grandparents actually lived in Fort Erie, so he knew exactly what I was talking about. It was very interesting vibe. It's kind of got that hard rock edge, and that really goes back to my roots as well, like with the guitar and everything, because that was the music I first grew up listening to, was country and rock, right? So very tailor-made to the roots of where I started to now. And yeah, I really like how that song turned out. As I said, that was another song that was mixed and mastered by D-Mack. I actually did the mastering. He did the mixing and the sound engineering, the recording. And then that leads into the third track, which was Retrospect, one of my proteges, a fellow Hamilton rapper. His first appearance on record. His name's actually Mitch too as well, but Retrospect is artist name. And that was his first appearance on a song because I was trying to get him on songs. He was actually supposed to be on the song Crossfire for Nail Gun as well as OG Lope Dog, but didn't make it in time. But I kept trying to reel him in because I was like, nah, man, if you could rap, you want to rap, I'll help you out with some lyrics. Let's get you on. Let's get you on, right? So All I Want was the first time I could actually get him on the studio. Now, we actually tried recording this song a few different ways. Like, there was actually a hell of a process to make All I Want. The original idea of how All I Want would have sounded stemmed from so many ideas. I mean, like Back Again, it was actually based on an idea of a song I did for a rough mixtape back when I was in high school. But All I Want too was actually a more reggae sounding kind of song originally back on one of my mixtapes. I did a song like that, same chorus pretty much, but like different vibe, kind of almost like a reggae song. I really liked Bob Marley and Jimmy Cliff and Toots and the Maytals at the time, so it had that kind of sound. But with this way, I kind of wanted to turn it into more of a beautiful romantic love song, and most of the beats were Tone Jones. Like these first three were all Tone Jones, and I really liked the idea of this beat. It was very mellow, very progressive. I knew what I could rap was going to be very good because I could just rap about all the things I wanted and just be true to my desires, right? And love being a key thing, that was a cool part about it. And then, like I said, originally, Retrospect was definitely going to be on it. And I was in the process of getting this one singer who I'm no longer friends with either. I miss her, sadly. I actually dedicated a later song where I apologized to her and admitted like she was my first crush. And even though we only kissed, we never really got fully intimate or anything. I really always had a big crush on her since high school. And I'm sorry I pushed her away even as a friend. Like, I guess her boyfriend was overly jealous and didn't want us hanging out. But I really enjoyed spending time with her. And I mean, I tried to get her on this song because she really could sing good. She was very shy about it. She didn't even want to come to a professional recording studio to do it. But you know, I wanted to like make a song with her. So I actually got her to record the vocals, which if you watch one of my other videos, you actually will hear her singing her version of it that did see the light of day, but it never got put into the track because the vocals were very rough. Same with when Mitch recorded his verse, it sounded really rough. Like there was a lot of like noise and commotion. It just, the quality wasn't as perfect or as in sync as I would have liked it. Now, some things I ended up recording here that did make it on the record were very crisp, clean. There was no background sounds at the time. So I did use certain elements of that with Mahjong Titan and other records, but it's hard to record here sometimes because there's dogs barking. My parents are talking really loud. The TV's loud, trains, neighbors, you name it. I hear everything going on. So I can't always record as luxuriously as I would have liked, especially back then. There was a lot going on. It just was very difficult. So I wanted this song to sound really like mint professional. And that's probably why it has over 500 views and so many likes, is because it was done properly. Now, I tried to explain this to Grace. She didn't like that. She kind of got mad at me, cut off her ties to me, but I forgive her. In fact, if she was watching this now, I'd just say, I'm sorry. I really always had strong feelings for you. I didn't want to push you away. I'm sorry for the whole situation with the boyfriend, too, and that we kissed or whatever. It's just, you know, I really liked you. In fact, I liked you since high school. You were actually probably one of my first crushes as a girl I liked, not just for her appearance, but for her personality. I mean, we always would talk and, you know, it was a really nice friendship, and I'm sorry that it fell apart as well. But yeah, moving on to the next sort of phase of the journey of this song, because it was pretty intense of a journey to make this song. Now, I tried getting many people on this song, and different things just didn't sort of pan out the way I would have liked it to, right? Um, so I kind of got stuck with, okay, who are we going to get to sing the song? Because Grace doesn't want to come to the studio to sing it now. So I asked Reiko, because obviously Reiko and me, we're tight, we're good friends. You know, we both have a lot of love and respect for each other as artists. So I was like, okay, I'll get Reiko to sing it, because there was a bridge where I kind of sing Japanese. And I was like, you know what? I'll just get her to do it. It'll sound way lovelier if she does the bridge too, right? So I got her to basically sing my original chorus, which I would have done with Grace. Instead, it was just Reiko singing it. And then she did the bridge. And then Retrospect did make it back to the studio enough. He did actually show up the one day that we needed him to drop his verse. And even though it was like 8 bars, it was a short verse. Gat's verse, who did the final verse, was 8 bars too. So it kind of blended like they each get like what you would look at as normally half a verse, and then I get a whole verse because it's my song, right? But everybody else still gets a good chunk of like short but sweet sort of dialogue in it, right? Like Reiko really sings as many vocals pretty much as I rapped almost. I'd say if you were looking at it, she probably sings about 12 bars worth of vocals. I rap 16 bars, and then me and Mitch did the intro, and then Gats did the other verse because we had worked together so well on It's an Adventure, but I was like, I want to get a Korean rapper on there. That would just be really cool. I've had Japanese rappers. I've never had like a Korean rapper. And I was really listening to a lot of Twice at the time, and especially the one Korean rapper in the group, Kim Do-hoon. I really liked how she sounded in the song Special. So I was like, oh, I gotta get somebody who's kind of like that. And I was like, oh, well, Gats is a Korean female. I'm like, I'll see if she's willing to rap on it, right? So I said, could you mix like English and Korean together and spit this like verse, like to kind of fill off the end, right? So she ended up doing that. And it turned out really good. It was really cool because you get all these different vibes, like this really internationally blended sound. Like first you get Retrospect Mitch, he's talking in English and rhyming kind of in the intro. Then I come in, I start speaking Japanese. Then Reiko comes in, Japanese female singing. Then I start rapping, mostly English. I think I used a word of Japanese in there somewhere, or I think I used like a reference to like a Chinese term or something, but it was very cool. And then she sings the chorus again, and then Retrospect comes in, raps like his desire, his struggle. All he wants is, living like a boss. I wrote those lyrics for him, but I wrote it based on his perspective, how I thought it would sound coming from him. And he agreed. It turned out very good. In fact, we went and shot the music video. It was very awesome to do that music video because we went to this crazy location, tried to give it a really like Twin Peaks kind of vibe. And then I took video footage that I had of Reiko and basically like looped it and synced it to basically make it look like she was singing the chorus in a way that it like tied in as like it's like an old video playing to remind of like what the main theme or the chorus of the song was. And then Gats actually couldn't partake in the music video at the time, but there was this Korean model I was friends with named Candy, and she offered to basically do like the acting part of like that video. So that's actually not Gats in the video. It's a Korean actress who basically stepped up to play like sort of the acting role of what that character would be in that particular story. But it turned out very cool. And yeah, then after Retrospect's verse, Reiko sings the bridge, mostly in English, and then a bit of Japanese right at the end. And then Gats comes in with that Korean English mixed rap, and it was very cool. Like I said, we're shooting the video. We went out to the woods. We were near these tunnels. It really had like a David Lynch sort of vibe. I apologize for the train. They always like to show up when I'm doing these recordings and whatnot. As I mentioned before, they just have the worst timing. It's like they literally run on their own schedule and just show up whenever the hell they feel like it. They have no sense of consistency, apparently. But so yeah, that was All I Want, and it was a very beautiful song. It turned out really well. The music video I was really proud of because I was really trying to direct it like a David Lynch movie, like very abstract, letting the ideas kind of flow to me creatively and getting into the zone. And yeah, I think that one turned out really well, which is probably why it has so many likes and it has over 500 views as it is. So that was that song. And then in the previous video, I mentioned that I had got 4 beats from Tone Jones for free before I even started Nail Gun, and then got the rest. I technically only paid for 2 beats, but this was one of the freebies I got in the beginning. And I didn't end up putting this on Nail Gun because this song just had more of a laid back kind of radio free Roscoe vibe. And it also was inspired by a Canadian band called Reverie Sound Review. And or Reverriere sound review, depending on how you pronounce it in French. That's probably how you say it. But very good Canadian band, very underrated. They struggled so much to even get their first record out that by the time it came out, they didn't even sound the same anymore. So it's like they were obviously forgotten, and they were such a talented group. It sucks. But I loved what she sang on two of these songs she did. Passes and Passports and One Marathon. And I really liked those songs. So they were a key inspiration. And there were a lot of Radio Free Roscoe references. As I said, that was very inspiring for me. So I ended up singing a bit like that. And then it was also inspired by the opening Dragon Ball Z theme song, Hechara, Shara, Hechara. Well, Hechara means no, it's no worries, right? Almost like the Akuna Matata sort of vibe, right? But yeah, and then I added like a bit of Japanese, a bit of Spanish in there, and then just the idea of it's no worries, like looking at like all the people who supported me, who came and gone, like people who were nice that were no longer in the picture, sort of reminiscing like, wow, times change, but it's no worries. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing my thing. And that was the vibe of it. And just the idea of the beat was like going back in time and then moving forward, and sort of like running a marathon, like you complete like the cycle, right? And that's why like I was like singing about like crossing the finish line at the end. Like we're almost near the end of this musical project. Me and D-Mack, he did the mixing and the mastering for this one as well. And that ties into the song, which was inspired by Virus Fukasu no Hi, the title itself too. The ending scene of the movie, Yoshizumi, the main Japanese character, when he's trying to explain to the one American guy, because they don't say wonderful too often. Most of the time they would just say life is now, right? So Jinsei wa ima. That's what he says to him. But really he's like, that's not quite right. He's like, no, you know what? Life is just wonderful. And that's what he says at the end of the movie. And that's why I was like, life is wonderful. So I was like, and it was wonderful. I was thinking about my romance with Haruna at the time. We'd been together for almost 2 years. It was very beautiful. I was very loyal and in love to her, even though we're no longer together. I could look back as those feelings were very true. And that's why I got Olga to come back on and sing that song. So it turned out very beautiful in that regard. She did a great job. It was actually recorded the day that Roy Orbison died. And I was listening to Roy Orbison at the time. So I was like, oh, I got to give a shout out. Since we're recording right on the day he died, give him a shout out, right? And Retrospect was actually there when we did this song, oddly enough. But this one was mixed and mastered by Daybreak, and that was Tone Jones' instrumentation, but it came later. So sort of different sort of playing field than the usual formula for the rest of the album. But yeah, Life is Wonderful turned out very, very beautifully, I think. And there was also David Bowie references because I was listening to his album Outside a lot at the time. And yeah, that album, the album as a whole was really good. But yeah, that was probably one of my favorite tracks. Like as far as like a beautiful, positive kind of love song to make, it had a vibe of just like a ray of sunshine in love. Like that's what Life is Wonderful symbolizes to me. And Olga, who wrote the lyrics based on like what I described, I wanted the song to be like. That's why I didn't know what to come up with the chorus. That's why when I get stuck like that, I often pass it off to Olga and I'll say, okay, something like this, ideas like this, but I don't know what to write. I don't know what to sing. You're the genius with that. You'll come up with something great. I always know that because she always does great work. So she did. And Reiko is a very great songwriter too. Now, I wrote the lyrics for All I Want, whereas with Life is Wonderful, I only wrote the verses and the outro, right? But yeah, Olga did a fantastic job. She's a really great songwriter too, and so is Reiko. But like I said, I didn't even know what to write for the chorus of this. How do I capture the vibe of Life is just wonderful? And even though she doesn't sing it, I sing it, and like I rap it, and then I also say it like at one point in one of her bridges, and then she kind of starts like this like upbeat sort of happy positive rhythm about going all the places I would love to go, and it's just beautiful. I like the way she did it. It was just magical the way that song turned out. It was very good. And then, of course, that leads into the TCHA skit, which is short for Talented Cokehead Arse skit. And that was because when I was making the short film for Tanabata, the actor, he kind of bailed early when we were in the middle of still filming, and we didn't even get to get all the shots we wanted or make the movie as good as we did, especially because one of the neighbors was talking really loudly in the background. She was louder than us. It showed up on there. I had to like slow down the audio and make it look like we were really high and stoned, and that's why the audio was slowed down, just so it would be less noticeable in case people wondered why I did that. It's because she was talking louder than we were, and because he just bailed, and he bailed to go do coke. Even my cinematographer, who was my neighbor at the time, Byron, he's actually the bass player in the SOS Brigade Quartet. But it was so funny because when he left too, and I was in the bathroom, I came out after, he said, you know, he's leaving to go do blow, right? And I was like, wait, what? He's bailing on the fucking movie early for that? I was pissed, but I was like, oh man, I'd never want to work with somebody like that again. I don't want to be near that shit. I don't like that, man. Never done hardcore drugs, right? So yeah, I was pissed. I didn't like that at all. But that's why, and he tried to slander me and talk trash and was like threatening to like sue me and all this. And I'm like, what are you gonna sue me for? You didn't even do the job properly and stay as long as we needed to. We had to like salvage the material we had to even make that short film, right? So I'm like, what a talentless cokehead arse. Like, you know what I mean? And I was thinking of that because I was listening to Eric Satie's like documentary, and that was one thing that like he like shouted at like one of the judges in court once, and he was like, that talentless arse, right? And I was like, oh, well, he's a cokehead too. So talentless cokehead arse. And that's where that came out. Now, the instrumentation was produced by myself. It was mastered by me. It was mixed by D-Mack, but I actually did that beat myself. And it was very funky, upbeat, groovy, short. Bum, 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 bum. And it was just like, even though it's short but sweet because the beat's really funky and groovy, right? So, and I just wanted to say something like kind of comedic, just as like a short break in the album, especially because we had already dropped such depth for the first 5 songs of the record, the first 5 tracks, right? So the 6 is kind of like a little break from all the deep emotional, like sort of ideas of the record. So you get like a break. Sort of like in Mahjong when you're playing like the Ricci, like, you know, pass for the next round. That's what it was like. And then it leads into the next track, which was produced, well, the instrumentation was done by Tone Jones. It was mixed by D-Mack, mastered by myself. I did the verses, and then that's why I gave D-Mack shout outs, because that was one of the first tracks we actually had recorded together too. And that's when he said, you know what? Mr. McMillan's not really that cool. Call me D-Mack, yo, D-Mack. So I was like, okay, D-Mack. I was like, all right, that sounds hip-hop-y related. Yeah, we'll use that, D-Mack, right? So I gave him shout-outs. And then Tone Jones actually sang the chorus, the guy who makes the beats, right? So he did a very good job singing the chorus of, like, making dreams into reality. And that's what the song is. It could really relate to, like, the law of attraction and manifesting and mysticism as well, which is kind of funny because it was almost like a foreshadowing of what would later be determined in the journey of mine, right? But yeah, it turned out really wonderfully, and there were some really good lyrics, and I referenced some sort of crazy ideas because I heard about this like 7-foot tall basketball player named Wilt the Stilt, and I thought that was so crazy. And the fact that they called him the Stilt, like stilts, very high up, right? So I thought that was funny, and because it was like real, ill, all those things, still, and I was like, oh, I gotta like throw some reference like that, right? And then the reality, battle me, like all the lyrics, as I said, like I was always heavily influenced from I'd say the 3 most influential rappers to me were Big Pun, Jizza, and Buck 65. That's where I'd say my style is a combination of that. So yeah, it was very lyrical. It was very inspiring, upbeat, motivating, like turning dreams into reality. You know, it's a great message. So, and it had a very funky, upbeat vibe to it. It had some really great guitar to it. So that song was really wonderful. And then that leads into the next track, Campfire Tales, which is the title comes from a movie I really loved as a kid. This like 90s like horror anthology movie where these kids kind of get stranded on the road. They end up building a campfire to tell warm and start telling stories to pass the time while they wait for like help to arrive. And they don't even realize that they're already dead, that it's actually their spirits doing this. And it's a very wild story, right? But I was like, oh, you know what? Campfire tales. Like rappers, they're telling these scary stories in their songs, right? They're like telling campfire tales. So the idea kind of unfolded like that. And then it had a really dark, like almost Twin Peaks kind of vibe to the instrumental. So I was like, oh, I should get a sax solo at the end. This was before I had a saxophone solo. So I actually got this saxophonist from Australia named Hugo to end up playing the tenor sax solo on that. But it turned out really good. And the idea of that, the funny thing with this song is the verses were like telling stories. I was telling like these stories of situations and environments, like with characters I knew, real people that happened in my neighborhood and in my town and whatnot, right? And then with the chorus, it was actually a reference. This is what's so funny, because I said going back to the 40 Erie roots. Like it's the chorus is actually a change of lyrics, but similarly referencing an old Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler. You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your chips when you're sitting at the table. There'll be plenty time for counting when the dealing's done. So I took that and I was like, okay, how do I make that like rap, hip hop style? Like make it reflect the idea of what I'm going. So you gotta know when to fuck 'em, know when to chuck 'em. And like all that, like that's what it is. If you hear Campfire Tales, you'll hear it. You'll be like, "Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, that's where Kenny Rogers played an influence on the chorus of that song, right?" And yeah, that song really had a unique vibe to it. In fact, even Mr. McMillan said, this is a darker song, but it's got a really creative sort of vibe to it. It sounds different from anything else you made. In fact, I noticed that with all your songs, they all have this like different, unique energy to it. And he really liked Campfire Tales for that reason. And then the next track on the record is Hip Hop Temple, which was a lot of fun to make as well. Now, this one actually had co-production as well as Headshot. I forgot that Headshot actually did have co-production from Smoke Signal Productions, and so did All I Want. It had some trumpet work. But yeah, Hip Hop Temple, the flute was Smoke Signal Productions as well. But the main beat was done by Tone Jones. And then this is where I got Honey Bee Sweet, the Australian rapper, back on it. And I was like, we should make a song like Tupac and Snoop Dogg together, like that hard, two of America's Most Wanted. And that's what the beat kind of gave me a vibe of. Now, interestingly enough, there were two rappers that were originally considered for the song that didn't make the cut because they wanted more money than I could afford in my budget at the time, which were Nature and Cannabis. And they were actually supposed to have the third verse. Because it didn't end up playing that way, I did the first verse and the third verse, and Honeybee Sweet did the second verse. And then my ex, Haruna, actually did the bridge for it. She like rapped it in Japanese, like the bridge leading into the final verse. And the chorus was like almost like that Freddy Krueger sort of vibe turned on about hip hop. And the idea was, and I'd had this song in my head for a long time, like the idea of this song, Hip Hop Temple, like sort of being like a sacred place, like keeping it real, keeping the energy high, spiritually being in tune with the music. Hip hop is a lot more spiritual than you could say gangster rap or trap music nowadays, as they call it. I call it crap, but to each his own. And you could say hip hop is a lot more spiritually in tune. That's why you have like artists like Wu-Tang Clan, and it was a very Wu-Tang Clan sort of inspired-ish song. And the chorus turned out really good. I got D-Mack to add the echo because he did the mixing and I did the mastering for that. And then Honeybee Sweet comes in, she goes hard. Then Haruna comes in, starts rapping briefly for a bridge in Japanese, and then I come in with this crazy verse. And it had a lot of references again to like the dynamic duo of Richie and Seth from Dusk Till Dawn, sort of embodied in that as well. So that was a very creative and intense song. I really love that song for that reason. It really was hardcore, but still old school kind of vibe, and I really like that about it. And then the next song we had on the record was a song that I did based on ideas of mixtape songs that I did with I had this song, this song previously recorded on a mixtape, which I lost unless somebody else has it, will never see the light of day. But the ideas of the chorus actually came from a song I did with a Hamilton rapper long ago back in high school, and we did a song for a mixtape he was making called Hard Times. So it was a reference to that. Like, I like the idea of what we came up with then. And then so when I was doing this song, this beat had a very intense vibe. Oh, by the way, Smoke Signal Productions, because he did a lot of co-production on this record. He also did the banjo in this. And then we also like had like a reference of like coffee and the Twin Peaks vibe. And there were a lot of crazy, like dark sort of supernatural references to it, because it was about like dark times, like almost like sort of like the gray clouds in the sky of the record, like the darkest the record's gonna get. Like at track 10, it's the darkest it is, but it's like it's got to get dark before it gets light again. And it was like about the idea of not getting consumed by the darkness and not falling astray. So it was a very poetically profound sort of song, in my opinion. It was very true to the idea of not succumbing to the darkness around you and sort of trying to find the light in the dark times. And then after that, we had what we would call the poem from Russia, which featured Elizaveta, the humanoid interface, which she was a friend of mine from Russia. And she was very interested in Twin Peaks and art and music and all this. She liked jazz music. And I was like, oh, well, I should get you on a song. Like, even if it's something short, it'd be really cool to just have, like, a Russian friend appear on the album and whatnot, right? So she's like, okay, what would you want me to do? So I gave her this idea of this poem about, like, things aren't what they seem, and, like, the universe is a lot more mysterious and sort of mystical than we perceive it to be. And it's funny because before I even realized just how true that is in our current reality, I was like stumbling upon that like unconsciously. Like I was like, the universe is so much more mysterious than we make it out to be. So I wrote her this like short poem summarizing a lot of like what this video from like a Twin Peaks book. It was a chapter from a Twin Peaks book. I summarized it and I added like the idea of life being like a game of Mahjong, right? And then she rapped it. I added the beat. That was my own production, that one there too. D-Mack did the mixing, I did the mastering, and she raps that with that like Russian accent, and it adds like a very foreign, mysterious vibe, like you're not expecting it, but it's trippy if you really pay attention to what she says. It's very deep, profound insight about sort of the mysterious mysticalness of the universe, right? And then it being like a game of Mahjong. You have to play every move carefully. So that was very cool to do. And that like that short little interlude, the poem from Russia, really leads into the next track, which is titled after the record itself, Mahjong Titan. Now, this track was quite a struggle to make in the beginning, especially with the idea that I wanted to add steel drums to it. I was listening to more of the Police at the time, and I really liked the idea of the steel drums being on Everything She Does Is Magic, like the sound of that. So I was supposed to get this guy who played steel drums to do it. He wanted $200 and I couldn't pay him right at the moment he demanded it. So he started cursing me out and blocked me and didn't want to do it. I was like, oh, how am I going to get the steel drums? So Smoke Signal Productions ended up coming up with like the main chorusy riff that we would use for the chorus of Mahjong Titan. And then Reiko's drummer in her band ended up playing the steel drums to add like that Caribbean vibe to the ending solo. Now, with that song, I actually experimented a lot more with the lyrics and kind of made it go all over the place, like very vibe, abstract, sort of like it's a party. You're just hanging out. Like things are not as focused and like direct and impacting, but yet they are. They're very hard hitting. It's very to the point, but at the same time, it's kind of like a loose sort of free feeling to the groove of the song too. And it was very cool. Like when I did the music video and everything too, I used samples of like playing the game and used Mahjong Titan like tiles to like spell out certain things. And another thing I could say with that was Let's Kill That Band. That was a sample from Dusk Till Dawn. But the dice roll you hear, the reference to that is, too, some people have wondered, like, why is there that dice rolling sound? Because in Mahjong, you actually do roll dice to decide certain parts of the game. So it was like, okay, time to roll the dice to see how the next sort of person's going to play their tiles, right? And that's what that whole song about. It's like relating the hip-hop game and life to a game of Mahjong. And it's a very powerful, deep, intense song. It's very lucid. It's mellow because of the steel drums and everything, which is the vibe I wanted to go for. Like, you're playing a game, you got to have fun. But at the same time, it's also a game you have to focus on and take very seriously. And that's, like, I tried to embody all those ideas into that song. And I think it turned out really wonderful in that regard. And then after Mahjong Titan, we have the song Valley of the Corpses, which I had this beat, and I love like sort of the retro video game sounds because Tone Jones did this instrumental too, same as the main instrumental for Mahjong Titan. With this one, I wanted to get a rapper who could rap really fast and be good and would be able to keep up with like how intense lyrically I was going to be, because I planned to rap my first verse like really quick and lyrical, rapping pretty much 16 bars in almost an 8-bar time frame. Like that's what I did. That was the challenge of that song. It was a hard song to record because I literally had to rap the fastest I'd ever rapped ever in a song and make it mad wordy, mad lyrical. Same Super Kami Guru Alucard song, but almost like double time. So it's like 16 bars in 8-bar time frame. It's very crazy, like da 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 da. And the chorus was inspired by a song by Genesis, because I was also listening to a lot of Genesis and Phil Collins at the time. So it's a reference to the song Land of Confusion, but then it also goes to the idea of like Alucard, Dracula, the Valley of the Corpses, when he used psychological terror to basically defeat his enemies without, like, you know, having to lose all his men in battle. And that was the idea of that, was the psychological terror of Valley of the Corpses, right? Like, lyrically, it terrifies you because it's like, how could I keep up with this guy? He's so lyrical. He's rapping so fast, so many lyrics, right? And then that's why I wanted somebody to come in for the second verse who could rap, if not as fast as me, close to as fast as me, and just sort of terrify the audience with like brutal metaphors and analogies. And that was Duelit. He was actually a friend of Reiko's who had beat cancer that she recommended to me, because I'm like, I need somebody who's really fast and intense to rap. Do you know anybody? And she's like, oh, I know this guy. He's always wanted to be on a song. He can rap really good. He just hasn't really gotten an opportunity. But he's gone through a lot. Like, he overcame cancer, all this. So he's like, he's the guy for you, right? So I got him to do his verse, and it was pretty sick because he even references Dracula in it throughout a lot of his like lyrics in the verse. So I was like, oh, perfect. He's like hyping it up, and he's kind of got more of a laid back style. So it like takes the audience like a bit of time to catch up from the transition of me rapping and the singing like of the similar to Genesis chorus of Land of Confusion turned into Valley of the Corpses, and then he comes in, and it's a lot more like straightforward, so the audience can fully digest like the fear of what we're instilling in them, which is great. And yeah, it's just a very intense song. I love how there's like the Pac-Man sort of movement in the synthesizers of that beat. And yeah, that song was just a wild song to make. But like I said, that was actually one of the hardest songs ever in my career to rap because like I said, I had to rap 16 bars double timed in an 8-bar time frame, which is pretty intense as you could imagine. But it turned out really good at the same time because of that. And then the next track I did was the therapy freestyle, which was my instrumental too. And it was an instrumental that I came up with basically just to back what I already rapped and recorded as a freestyle. I was frustrated one day dealing with neighbors, dealing with circumstances, certain things just going on. I was like very emotional. I was kind of pissed off, right? But I sat there and I started like, it's funny because I don't know why, but I just felt inspired and sort of like an intuitive nature. Like I just hit record on my phone and just started rapping because I was mad. And I just started rapping about all the things I was mad about, like venting it out, like therapy almost, right? Like da 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 da. And then I was like, after I finished it, I was thinking to myself, I was like, shit, man, that was so good for a freestyle. I'm like, I should put that on a track, like an album, like because it was just so good to freestyle that, like off the top of my head, just fueled by the intense emotion at the time. I was like, okay, I'll add a beat to it. I'll give the vocals and the beat to D-Mack. He can mix and master it, put it all together, make it sound smooth. But yeah, I was really like excited about that because I was like, shit, for a freestyle, that was as good as most of the stuff I've written. Like I was just in the zone when I was freestyling that, right? And I do admit this was back in the days when I was smoking marijuana and doing not so good things for my health, but you know, through our trials and adversity, some of our greatest things come about, what I've noticed. So yeah, that was just a very exciting like sort of thing to stumble upon, right? Especially with making that track. And like what I could say about that too is somebody had said, "Oh, you should like rap like your feelings or whatever," right? And it's funny because it was when they said that because I was kind of ranting and bitching and venting out how I felt, and somebody said that, and then that's why I kind of felt inspired. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do that. I just hit record. I just started rapping and I freestyled, and it was so good. It was as good as something I'd written, just fueling like the emotion of what I felt, right? And then, yeah, that leads into the final track, the Gymnopody trilogy, which, as I mentioned before, Eric Satie played a very big influence on the musical direction of my music and records moving forward, especially around the third album. I was listening to a lot of his music. I really loved the Gymnopedies, the 3 Gymnopedies, and that's why I was like, oh, the Gymnopedy trilogy. I was also big into Twin Peaks at the time, so I thought, okay, because there's 3 spiritual entities, like if I got OG Loke Dog and Retrospect on a song together, that would be like really cool because each of us could play a part, right? And then I looked at it as, okay, well, the arm, he's like the most mystical part. He's always chilling in the room. He's got like the great source of power. So I would be the arm. And then OG Loke Dog, since he's been there the longest, he would be the one-armed man. And then the rival, the darker, more intense version, that would be Retrospect, Bob, right? So that's how it came about. It was the idea of each of us playing a character. So obviously OG Loke Dog was there first. He was the one-armed man, Mike. He comes in, he raps his story, referencing Eric Satie and Twin Peaks and all this crazy stuff. And then Bob comes in and he's referencing like all this dark Twin Peaks stuff and all this like darker sort of content of like hustling, and he references Leland Palmer like swerving with the fringe on top because he was possessed by Bob and he was all crazy at the time, like so that was the idea of that, and he didn't get that. I'll put it that way. Neither OG Loke Dog or Retrospect understood the references of that song until they actually watched some of Twin Peaks, and then they were like, oh, now I get it. Now I get what you were like talking about. That's crazy. Like the way you turn that into rhymes. And then I come in with the last verse, and it's sort of like the like Grand Master, the arm, sort of in the place of the spiritual realm beyond the sycamore trees, sort of telling his part of the story. And the cool thing was, I was listening to the Sycamore Tree song from the Twin Peaks soundtrack, which is featured in the last episode of the second season of the original series. And Jimmy Scott had this really haunting voice, unique, right? But like, I was so good at singing that Sycamore Trees song. I was like, I should sing it, but I should sing it like in this wild, like improvised jazz singer sort of style way, because I was getting more into jazz at that point too. And I was like, sing it like so it relates to like the Gymnopédie trilogy, right? And that's why there were mad Eric Satie references, Twin Peaks references throughout the album. Very Twin Peaks, Eric Satie, abstract, unique kind of art. And then, yeah, so I sang that. Then OG Lope Dog came in as Mike the One Arm Man. Retrospect as Bob comes in. And then I come in as like the arm, Super Kami Guru Alucard. And then that's what the chorus is. It's a summarization in like a little short hook at the end to explain who all the characters are in this story and what their roles are. And then we actually got a vibraphonist to play the solo at the end to kind of give it this more pretty jazzy, mellow Twin Peaks, Eric Satie kind of abstract vibe, and really make the album sound really beautiful and like pure at the end. Because that song goes through a lot of ups and downs as we're rapping. Like there's dark times, there's like positive times. So it's like you're riding the waves of that song. But after that chorus comes in, especially because the beat actually goes up a scale and it gets higher near the end, it becomes more light, more positive, carefree, good natured, right? So you hear that coming about when I start rapping my verse and the chorus, and it gets and breezy and positive and upbeat. So I was like, well, it should end on a very pretty, happy ending sort of note. So that's why I was like, oh, well, the vibraphone, I was fascinated with the sounds of vibraphones at the time. I was like, the vibraphone has a very beautiful, pretty sound. And the guy did it for not much to actually contribute the vibraphone solo to it. But it made it sound that much more beautiful and pretty with the strings and the piano kind of leading out. And then the and it had a vibe of just sort of like the album's come to an end. It's peaceful, all is well, everything is good. It was a very emotionally soul-stirring story. It was a battle. It was a challenge of the game of Mahjong, but you end up the winner at the end, right? And that's how you should look at life. That would be my philosophy of life, is always play it like a game of Mahjong. So, and of course, that instrumental was produced by Tone Jones, the instrumentation. And then the vibraphonist, Mr. Roboto, he did the vibraphone solo. I did the singing, the hook, and the final verse. OG Loke Dog did the first verse, Retrospect did the second. And the mixing and the mastering was actually done at Daybreak Studio, where we recorded it. That was one of the few songs he did, along with Life is Wonderful. And he sort of added his own flavor to Mahjong Titan. And everybody really, I would say that was the most expansive record. If I was to really look back on Mahjong Titan, I was really proud of that record. I really love that record. I do think it was one of my most musically unique and diverse records. But I love how it had such a big expansion of so many different kind of guests. Because I got most of these beats for free, and the ones I didn't, I made. It just made it that much more easy to pay for guests and get as many guests on this record and really get everybody in their right place, contributing a beautiful part to the story. So you have the most amount of characters with Mahjong Titan. And it's funny because you look at Mahjong Titan tiles, like they all have different characters on them. So you could look at it as each character is like playing their own tile. And that's why I could honestly say that that album was very beautiful. It had a very luscious, wide variety of soundscapes. It goes back to the roots. It had that album is just a phenomenal piece of work. Like I am so proud of that. I mean, it's not like I would sit there and say, oh, the album is really great because it sold a lot of copies. But whether it sold a lot of copies or not, in fact, I believe, you know what, on some level, it sold millions. It might not be evident in our current reality. If you believe Neville Goddard, all things exist in the now. So it may not appear to have sold millions, but it's already sold millions in the spiritual realm because it's that fantastic of a record. I would say that about Nail Gun and Impulse. And like Impulse to Nail Gun to Mahjong Titan, and even with the next album we will discuss tomorrow, it's like I've constantly tried to evolve, try new things, experiment as an artist, and not really try to sound like anybody else. Come up with ideas that, as Goddard would call too, an immaculate conception. Ideas that might be inspired or influenced or referencing some other piece of music or work that I like. However, still trying to give it my own vibe, my own personality, and basically using that as sort of analogies or metaphors to relate to my own wonderful story. Now, as I said before, sadly, I wish I had a physical copy of this to show the audience, but definitely check it out if you haven't. It's available on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, YouTube, all the streaming platforms. It's all on there. And like I say, us artists, especially when we're not backed by major record labels or promoters or managers, we really have to self-finance this by ourselves. And it's not easy when we only get a limited income to work with. Now, it doesn't mean that the albums don't deserve to sell millions. In the spiritual realm, they've sold millions. I'm convinced of that because they are phenomenal records. And it's like, you can't keep a good man down forever, right? So I look at it as all the albums that I've made, I'm very proud of. And I could say I'm proud of them without making a lot of money from them. They deserve to make a lot of money. They are great records. I would say these albums that I have made are better than any other rapper there is nowadays. And it's not ego. It's not being cocky. It's compare somebody like Drake or Lil Wayne or A$AP Rocky or Kendrick Lamar to like what I've done, and you would see there is a vast difference. You would compare me more to the likes of Big Pun, Tupac, Biggie, Big L. That's the lyrical style. Even earlier Eminem, if you have to compare me to Eminem. I really don't like that comparison because I don't relate to him at all. I'd prefer if you compare me to Buck 65. Because yes, we're both white, but we're both Canadian, and that's not even the key reason either. I would say I'm a lot more similar to Buck 65 as an artist because I'm more underground. I'm more abstract. I don't try to fit the image of making gangster rap. I just make good hip hop music that's infused with soul and Japanese pop and jazz and rock and reggae and all these different vibes and influences. And that's what I think makes it beautiful. I mean, I'm telling my story in my own unique way that is true to myself. And God dwells within me. So all things are possible to God and all things are possible to man, right? So that's another way you could look at it as the embodiment of my name. I have fulfilled my stage name in its sense. I'm super powered, sort of like a super Namekian, because I relate to the Namekians more than the Saiyans when it comes to Dragon Ball Z sort of characters. But then Kami is God. So God is within. And then Guru, I'm sort of the wise grand master who's this genius at making music and has been making music since I was 14 years old. And then also I'm Alucard because no matter how many times I get kicked down, no matter how much has like threatened to destroy me, and there's been times where I almost died in my life, yet I'm still here. I just come back stronger and stronger every time. So I get resurrected as Alucard. And that's why I feel like if anybody buys these albums and supports me, by the way, thank you. I'm very grateful and I appreciate it ahead of time. And that's why I would encourage you, like, just check them out. Check them out on YouTube. Costs you nothing. If you have like a Spotify membership, you could listen to them for free on Spotify as well. Just look up Super Kami Guru Alucard. And yeah, like, you know what I mean? Listen to them. And if you don't agree that it's the best hip hop you've ever heard in a long time, since like the 90s era, then you know what? Fine, don't buy it. But if you can honestly keep an open mind and say, you know what? This guy is a master of what he does. He is better at doing this than anybody I've ever heard otherwise in this genre. then yeah, definitely please support the records. I could use all the fan support and appreciation, especially because if you guys buy these records, it gives me more of the necessary means, provisions, and income to make more wonderful music for all of you. And then I can keep making these videos as I make more and more records, and we can all have a good time together. You see how it works? It's a cycle of circulation. I put the good music out there, I send the good energy, I thank you, I'm grateful for all the people supporting me. You support me, you help me out, you support the records, you realize the true talent, the energy. And I always try to keep things mostly in the positive perspective. Unlike a lot of other rappers, I try not to dwell on negativity because what you put out, you get back. So that's why, like Common's a very positive rapper. I've always tried to keep things balanced in the positive light. Now, you will go through situations in your life that are contrary to the positive. You can make a good song about that, but always try to find like the light-hearted, bright side of everything. And that's what I've honestly always tried to do with my music. I feel that Mahjong Titan was like the yin and the yang. Everything was perfectly balanced with that record, and I'm very proud of it. So definitely check it out. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story, and stay tuned tomorrow where we will discuss my fourth album, Final Requiem, which was the last record that I actually got to work with D-Mack for. And he did a lot of great stuff on this record, but unfortunately our contract was up. He was retiring. Things just, we had to go our separate ways. It was just that part of the journey. People come and go in your life, and the people that stay are the people you will always love and cherish the most. That's why I love Hitomi Shimatani and Chihara Minori so much. Arigato gozaimasu, minasan. Super Kami Guru Alucard. Peace out. Matane.